Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, and welcome to this Using Evernote webinar, which is using Evernote to manage online reading. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, as I said. I'm an Evernote certified consultant, and I'm one of the Evernote regional leaders for North America. And as you can imagine, I love Evernote. And so what I hope to do today is to walk you all through really how I utilize Evernote for my online consumption. And so to do that, I would like to actually walk us all through a couple of things. Um, One is really how I use Evernote to listen, read, and watch. And what I'll do is I'll cover some of the pointers around really how to manage online reading to make it manageable for you. And then I will walk you through some of the setup that I do and capturing into Evernote in those various modalities. Feel free to ask me questions throughout. I'll be monitoring the chat here. And so it's out of the corner of my eye. But if you're watching the replay, feel free to leave a comment and or leave a question, and I will be happy to respond to those asynchronously as well. And so if you can kind of consider my own thoughts and process around reading, I think a lot of people who know me think about me from the perspective that I always say I read, therefore I am. I'm just a natural reader. I'm someone who really loves and enjoys reading, and I'm always going to be reading. I mean, there's just never going to be a time when I'm not reading. So also recognize that part of it, which is that I come from a place of always wanting to capture more, consume more in that sense. And so if you're not in that mindset and you're really trying to stay on top of these issues, then kind of keep that in mind as well, because some of these might actually be useful to you in being able to make this more productive use of your time in all of it. So first and foremost, as I said, I think about this from a consumption perspective, which is that when we think about online consumption, they really fall into the three modalities, right? We can listen to things, auditorily, we can read things visually, and we can watch things visually and audibly at the same time. And so I really think of all of my read later in those kind of meshed together formats, just because it's one of those things. I can turn written text into audio. I can download and watch a video asynchronously from live events. There are different ways in which we can think about these pieces. So start to think about it from that multimodal perspective, that multimedia perspective, that is, and then you can get a better handle on all of this. And I'll explain as really why I think about it from that perspective as we make our way through today's session. So first and foremost, as I said, I keep these in three buckets. My listen later is, in essence, articles I convert to audio and podcast episodes I'm not subscribed to. So just from a personal perspective, throughout the week, I am both capturing articles that I want to read, and I'll show you how I do that in a bit, but articles that are longer in nature and I just know I'm not going to have time to read, I will have a general tendency to use a tool, and I'll show you the tool shortly, to in essence just take that article and convert it to audio, and then it becomes a podcast episode that I can listen to. It's read by a machine, and it's done in a pretty good, audio quality, such that I don't even mind going ahead and doing that. Now, there are longer format pieces, whether that be book or periodical, that I'm reading in longer format. And for those, I always use my Kindle or the Kindle application on my iPad because I'm just much more likely to read it on that device, that single use device in terms of my Kindle. But on the iPad, I'm much more likely to use it in that format as well. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm maintaining a little bit of boundaries regarding what type of material I'm reading where and how I'm consuming it. And for me, many times when I'm sitting at my computer, I'm just not likely to read a very long article on screen. So if I'm going to have a really long article, I'm going to convert that to audio and listen to it. If I really do want to read it because I want to get fine-grained in it and annotate it and all these other things, I might email that article into Evernote, into my read later folder, and convert it to audio so that I have both options throughout the existing week, the current and future week, to be able to consume it. And if I consume it in one area, great. If I consume it in the other and mark it up, also great. And since I have that option, I tend to do both. Podcast episodes. So generally, I listen to podcasts to which I'm subscribed, but there are lots of podcast episodes that I come across serendipitously online through either various searches on Google, or I'm doing research for something and somebody suggests a podcast to me and I go, oh, great. And so I then go ahead and type in the subject. I don't want to subscribe to that podcast. But I do want the content. I want to be able to listen to that one episode. And so I use actually Evernote for this, and it's just a helpful tool for me to be able to do that. And I'll show you, explain to you how I do that. Next up is my read later. And these are for articles and periodicals that I need to read for work, professional reasons, what have you, and then I want to read, which is most of my, other reading in the world. There might be various topics that I want to be able to pick up, if I want to learn more about the Socratic method, if I want to learn more about whatever, I'm going to go ahead and be following those articles in different tools, as I'll show you, and then I want to basically capture those into my read later. So we've listen later, read later, and then we have watch later. And these are really two groups of videos here, and those are videos that are recorded content in video and audio that I want to watch, and then there are webinars, which are just like this. They're live events that I want to attend in real time, and so these are the three groupings, and these are the three that I'll really talk about throughout the rest of our time together. Some pointers as it relates to this. I just think it's really useful to kind of understand where I'm coming from, which is that I try to dedicate specific times of the day for different types of consumption. And so, for example, in the mornings, I do my podcast listening usually, and that's while walking the dog. And as you may or may not know, I have a blind dog, and so he is a slow walker. And that actually is a remarkably useful thing for me in the morning because my podcast listening has expanded over the course of time and as well as with the pandemic. And so now that I'm walking more in the mornings and in the afternoons, this really gives me an opportunity to actually listen to more podcasts. I listen to podcasts on a higher speed than most people. I sometimes listen to them at 2x and 3x speeds, and maybe you might as well. It just depends on the content, right? If it's something that's trying to explain something fine-grained to me, I might slow it down for that. But I'm listening to my podcast in the morning while walking the dog, and that just gives me that dedicated time. That's time that I can use productively to be listening. So I'm going to put those episodes and queue them up to listen to there. I have scheduled time for reading both book and periodicals, and this could be physical book materials. So I go to my library, I'm looking at the books in my library, and as well as the books that I'm getting from the library, and those will be set aside for a specific reading time in the morning and in the evenings. And as I said, I'm a heavy reader, so I just really love to have reading materials stocked up at any given time. I will also have reading material on my Kindle, again, books that I own or books that I have rented from the library, and those are available on my Kindle. And then I have this tertiary category in terms of scheduled book and periodical time. I do like to read either news or other kinds of business periodicals, and so I have subscriptions to various periodicals, but for example, the Washington Business Journal or the New York Times, I have those either emailed in. The WBJ comes to me as a PDF, so I could just email that into Kindle. And if you didn't know, every Kindle device comes with an email address, and actually comes with two different email addresses. So you can actually take your read later materials and forward them to, it's basically an alias at kindle.com. So if you go into your Kindle account, you can actually find your devices, all of your phone, tablet, and Kindles that are associated with your account has an email address associated with it. It also has a secondary email address which uses the at free, F-R-E-E, .kindle.com email address. Same alias. So say, for example, your alias was John Doe. It would be John Doe at kindle.com would be the device, that specific device that you want to email into that specific Kindle. Now it adds it to your Kindle account, but it also actually sends it to that device as well. Then and that will charge you, I forget what the the cost is, but it charges you some nominal amount. If somebody knows, throw that into the chat. I actually don't know how much it charges you if you per page for the download, but if you email it to the same username, John Doe at free.kindle.com, it actually will send it to the free account, which you have to download either manually by plugging the Kindle in, or if your Kindle connects to Wi-Fi, most do now, it'll download it while it's on Wi-Fi. So basically, the WhisperNet or the Kindle, cellular network, charges you for that part. But if you send it to the free version, free.kindle.com, then that email address is free and you don't pay for it. So I just forward it to the my PDF version of these news and magazines that I get, and I just forward them to the Kindle account, and then they show up there for me to be able to read in my scheduled reading time daily. And then I've subscribed to the New York Times on my Kindle, so that shows up as on the Kindle because I've subscribed to it. So get your reading scheduled, get it into your space. Like I have time during my lunch period, which is usually right about now, where I'm watching my watch later list in YouTube. So if you don't know, YouTube has a watch later list, and you can just basically click the little clock icon in YouTube, and YouTube will then add it to this watch later list. If you go into your video library, you'll see the watch later list, and you can see all the videos that you have waiting for you. And I just like to eat my lunch and watch those videos and keep up to date with those pieces of video content at that time. Next is, as best as I can, I try to actually attend webinars live. I have to attend a lot of webinars. I not only deliver webinars for work, as part of my job, but so I'm delivering, 1 to 2 to maybe 3 webinars a week to my clients. But I have to also attend webinars to stay on top of various things. And so I try to actually schedule those and attend them live, just because it gives me the opportunity to do Q&A, so I can ask questions of the presenters and get the most use out of it. The other part is because if I don't watch it live, there's a much higher likelihood that I will not actually end up consuming the webinar at all after the fact. So what I do is I try to actually schedule a time to watch. So if, for example, there's a webinar today, literally, I have to attend for work, but I'm not going to be able to attend it live. So I actually scheduled a time in my calendar to go ahead and watch that webinar later today in a time slot that I know I'm going to be able to watch it. And I've emailed the person who's putting on the webinar to send me the replay link as soon as possible, so that I'm able to go ahead and watch it in the time frame that I need to for work purposes. So these kinds of things help me make sure that I'm staying on top of my consumption schedule, so I'm not falling behind. And then finally, there is what I call the weekly purge, which is for those of us who are not inclined to get through all of our read later materials. There just comes a point where we have to have what I call stage 1 and stage 2 as it relates to the weekly purge. So in essence, stage 1 is moving things to reference. So in Evernote, I have full notebooks basically dedicated to each of the various areas of my life, and I call them life categories, and other people call them different things, life domains, what have you. And so I like to basically have those areas dedicated to reference, and I will then move items that I know I want to read, but have not had a chance to. And instead of worrying about not having read them, I will just move them to reference within the notebooks that they exist in, and then I tag it appropriately so that I know that I have not read those items. The next stage to it is that the rest gets deleted, and that is the hard call that you have to make every week. And I do this during my GTD weekly review because I'm a GTD practitioner, but you can do this at any time during the week, or maybe every 2 weeks if you have less reading material that's backing up. And you can just say, hey, listen, every 2 weeks, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at my notebooks that are containing my read, watch, or listen later materials, and just get rid of the items that I know I'm not going to read. Yeah, I picked it up when I thought I would want to read it. I got a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, and I captured it into Evernote, but now I don't I know that I'm not going to end up reading it. And if I wanted to, I could always find this material again on Google. So just go ahead and delete it. So move that first level stuff, which is for me, many times they're articles from subscribed periodicals online or other kinds of content where I'm not quite sure it's going to be there in the future and I want to have it for reference. And so I will capture that first into Evernote. That's stage one. Stage two is, okay, the rest I can get again if I ever needed it, and then I go ahead and delete it. And that really keeps that read, watch, and listen later notebook setup pretty clean and easy for me to be able to manage. So I hope that helps you in terms of just keeping on top of your online reading. Okay, so with that, what I want to do is now walk you through a little bit of setup and show you what I do in terms of um, going through the process of setting up the right notebooks and the stack notebook, as well as the items that you need in terms of tags and so on and so forth, and then walk you through capturing into some of these systems. And so to do that, I am in a demo account, and if the system will let me, it will. Wonderful. All right. So I'm in a demo account, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the setup of the pieces that I need to. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those in the chat. I'm happy to go ahead and answer your questions. I'm going to hopefully hold most of them to the end, but if I see something that's really pertinent, I'll try to answer those then. But in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to set up in Evernote 3 notebooks inside of a stack, and we're going to design some tags around our workflow that I just described in terms of the weekly purge. So first and foremost, we're going to hop over to our notebooks, and we're going to go ahead and create our first notebook, which is going to basically be a read later notebook. We're then going to create another notebook. We're going to call this one listen later. Oops, my typing is little laggy here. Okay, and then we have a watch later notebook. Now, I'm doing this in this way. You can choose to really do this in a number of different ways, and we're just going to call this later. And so, as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a stack, and I'm in essence adding these notebooks to this stack so that I have a stack of 3 different notebooks inside of the later stack. Now, you could easily just have a singular later notebook, but as if you've watched any of my prior webinars, you will note that in the past I have a later notebook, and later is a designed notebook for actions that you're going to take later that are not some days or maybes in the GTD world, but are later actions. And so I choose to use the listen, read, and watch to modify because we can't have the notebook with the same name. And so you can do it in any number of ways, but I've just chosen to create a listen, read, and watch later notebook stack. And so those 3 notebooks represent those 3 types of materials. And that helps me specify, especially if I'm emailing into Evernote, those items clearly. Then we're going to go over to tags. We're actually going to create some tags so that we're able to match up to our system here. So we're going to first create a read tag that's already present. It tells you, hey, that's already present. So again, we're going to do the same function. We're going to just, for sake of argument here, you could just make it read. If you don't already have a read tag, go ahead and make it read. I'm going to make this one read later. I'm going to create a new one that's called listen later, and then one that's watch later. All right, let's see if this will let me stack these. Whoops. So yeah, great. So what we want to do is then I'm going to create a later. Now, just note that this is just a later tag. I'm just using it for grouping these together. Again, you can do this however you'd like in terms of kind of management. I'm just creating a stack here so that I'm able to nest these tags. And so in a previous training, I already created it might be under here. Where are they? Do, do, do. Somewhere in here, I have created the tags already, and so they're in here. Where are they? Why is this not giving me? There they are. So you can see here that I've created some tags in this system, and so the later, read, and watch are there. So I'm just creating these as monikers. So think of this as later, and then listen, read, and watch, okay, are the three tags that I'm really trying to represent here. And what we're going to then do is create a final tag called unread. Okay, and this is really helps us with our reference items when we no longer leave them in our notebooks. We can then move them in. Now, this may be a little bit over manufacturing for you, so really scale this down to your needs. Maybe you need a singular notebook without the tags listen, read, and watch. Maybe you want to be able to have those identified. I just like to have a little bit more control and structure, so you may not. So just be mindful of that. And for unread, what that really means now is that if I go over to my notebooks and open up my new later stack, when I capture something into my listen, read, or watch later, and I tag that item. So let's just pretend this is an article that I've captured into my listen later, and this is a singular podcast episode. This is going to be now tagged. This thing over here. This is going to be tagged listen later. Okay, it's then going to be tagged. It's just going to be tagged listen later, right? So, say for example, now I decide this singular podcast episode I want to be able to save for later consumption, right? It's in a topic that I want to read, I want to listen to later, but I don't have time now. And really, when I decide to look at that whole topic, right? So say everything related to Stoicism, I might have a notebook called Stoicism, and I want to look at that Stoicism stuff at some later point in time. I can, in essence, go ahead and tag this Stoicism, what have you. But then what I will do is I will tag this unread. Okay, and that unread tag now tells me that when I put it into the right notebook, right, I'm going to go ahead and choose the right notebook that I want it to go to. I can say, pretend that this commonplace notebook is Stoicism, right? I go ahead and move it to Stoicism. Now, when I want to go ahead and listen or read materials related to that, that tag tells me that I haven't read it yet. I just put it in there. I parked it there in that folder. And so I can now look at the items in both of those perspectives, items that I have read and material that is new to me. I haven't read it yet, but I saved it for later consumption, and I know it's there waiting for me. So it's just helpful for me to be able to know that is in existence. Okay, so that's the whole setup, right? You have basically a listen, read, and watch later notebook. Anything that is listen, read, or watch, I tag as listen, read, or watch. And the reason for that, for me especially, is that I want to be able to search for things across notebooks. So as I told you, if I don't keep something in one of these notebooks, I may move it to another notebook in the system, and I still want to find all things that were listen later. So then I will search for the tag listen, right? In this case, I created the listen later tag, but I can search for tag listen later, and now I can find that across the entire system. Whereas I couldn't do that if I didn't tag everything in listen later as listen later. Does that make sense? Okay. So So someone's saying that it's hard to read my screen. I'm describing what I'm doing pretty well. I apologize if the screen is not showing clear enough, but I don't really have any control over that. But I am describing what I'm doing. So if you hear me, then hopefully that helps solve for the problem. But I'm trying to be descriptive in terms of what I'm doing on screen. So I apologize that the screen isn't as clear as it should be. I'm on my largest screen, and I'm putting this out at my highest resolution through the software. So I'm not sure what I can do otherwise. I apologize. And then someone said there, you got tied up at work. Will you provide a link to listen later? And yeah, so the same exact link that you are using to watch this, you should be able to watch the replay afterward. So don't worry about that. You can watch it after the fact. Okay, so that's the setup process. Hopefully that was useful. Now what we're going to do is move along to capturing. And I just wanted to show you the different types of capture that I do. And so first and foremost, I use Feedly as a tool for me to be able to capture content, and it's just a very, very helpful tool for me to be able to get through things. So Feedly allows me to do a whole host of things that I'm just very excited about. And so one is it allows me to subscribe to blog content, podcast content, RSS feeds generally, like, so even if there may be blogs in here that are in the system, but I can actually go find an RSS feed and paste that RSS feed into here and subscribe to that RSS feed here in Feedly. And I can do Google Alerts searches as an Evernote, I'm sorry, as a Feedly Pro or Feedly Premium subscriber. I can do all kinds of really great content capturing directly in the system. It has an integration directly with Evernote, so I can just attach my Evernote account, and then it gives me a drop-down item. So if I click on this particular item here, I just go ahead and click on the Evernote icon, and you can see I've already saved this item to it because it's green. Otherwise, it would be gray like the others. So I can click on this little button here at the top. It'll drop down and give me a list of all of my Evernote notebooks that are tied to this account. And then I can go ahead and suck it directly into that folder. So if this was a read later item, I would go ahead and just select my read later notebook and would go ahead and place that into the read later notebook. And something that they just added that I'm super excited about is they've added the ability for you to subscribe to newsletters here in Feedly. And so I was using a different tool up until now that allowed me to be able to do this, but now I'm really excited to have this option. What Feedly now does is it gives you an email address, and you can go to newsletters that you subscribe to and give them that email address, and then it will go ahead and bring that subscription, that email newsletter subscription, here into Feedly. So it really is an all-encompassing place where then you're able to tie your Evernote account to Feedly, and just as you're culling through items, you're able to just capture directly into the Evernote interface. So very, very bullish on Feedly. So that's where I do my primary article capture, right? I'm following lots and lots of news throughout the week, and so I'm paying attention to those things and capturing from here, from Feedly into Evernote. And then next, as a shout out to my colleague Dr. Buck, I think he's in the chat watching today. Hi Frank. I'm choosing this article as an example so you can see ways in which you can capture, again, things that you want to read later into Evernote. So here we have the Evernote web clipper. And the Evernote web clipper allows you to be able to capture content directly into your Evernote account. And so you can see here, I can click this button up here, and it opens up the web clipper, and I can choose simplified article and otherwise to get the the article the way you want it to. Note that you can also do a bunch of other really interesting things. So here I am on Frank's blog for a blog post that I had guest written for him, and say that I just want to copy this particular paragraph, right? Now, if I click the keyboard shortcut for the Evernote web clipper, or click the button up here, it will go ahead and open up the web clipper and gives me, now, see how it says selection? Now, this is the kind of the curiosity of the Evernote web clipper, which is that different formats and different content will give you different options in the clip format drop-down options. So here now, because I selected text, it's saying, hey, you have a selection. Would you like to use that selection as the clipped content? And so now I can go ahead and say yes, and then I can type in listen and, or I'm sorry, read, and I can go ahead and clip that to my read later notebook. Okay, so we can clip from that format, article, simplified article, full page, you name it, and then it will go ahead and be sucked into Evernote that way. Okay, now of course I can I can do a number of other things, but the tool that I was talking about before, which is, say that this is a really long article. I don't think this is that long. It's long enough that I would say, okay, maybe I want to listen to this article later. But usually articles that are 4,000, 5,000 words long, or a white paper or something else like that I want to read, I will use the tool called Narrow. And Narrow is a tool that allows me to be able to, if I click on this button right now, it will basically go ahead and convert this article into a podcast episode. And this is what happens. So here now, what I did was, I did this beforehand, right? So I clicked on that button, it goes ahead and pulls it into my Narrow account. And in essence, Narrow now went ahead and made a podcast episode of the content of this text document, right? So now Narrow gives me a podcast feed. I can listen to it right here in the website, right? I can go ahead and click on it. I can click download and actually download the MP3 of this and listen to it. But in essence, it's given me an RSS feed, and I go into my podcast app and I subscribe to that RSS feed. It's private for me, right? So only I should have it. And now, go walk the dog in the evening, I can go ahead and listen to that article at whatever speed I want to. And so instead of articles backlogging because I'm not able to keep up with them, I can just listen to them whenever I'd like to on a daily basis. Okay, so Narrow has dramatically improved my ability to keep on top of and read materials later, and it's just been such a great tool for me. It's a nominal cost. It's very inexpensive for you to be able to do any number of articles per week, and I've just been so excited to use it. So Narrow is there, and you can paste text, you can add PDFs and web articles and all kinds of other things. So super excited about that. There is a tool that I've been playing with, and I'm not going to say it because it's not working right now, that in essence takes video and will rip the audio and also make a podcast episode about it. And man, I really want it to work. But at the present moment, it's not. And so if it ever does come to work, I will certainly let everybody know about it, because that is just like the next level of being able to, instead of watching videos, have it available in a podcast feed. Okay, next up, talking about podcasting is the podcast concept. So here goes my podcast. It's the Productivity Book Group podcast, and so we read personal productivity books and discuss them together. And this particular podcast episode is about Upstream by Dan Heath. And so, say for example, I'm just a passerby, right? I came from Google and I want to be able to listen to this podcast, but here I am on the podcast site, right? I don't want to subscribe to the podcast. I just want to listen to this one episode, right? So most podcast websites give you the ability to go ahead and download that podcast, as we do. So what I would do is I would download this podcast episode, literally download it to my system. Then I would click on the Evernote web clipper, and this is going to allow us to clip the simplified article, right? So I want the context for this article, and so I'll go ahead and clip this into my Listen Later notebook. Okay, and now that's going to be in the system. I forgot to tag it listen, but it'll be here in a moment, and I will walk us through how that works. But in essence, now that it's here inside of the Listen Later notebook, and there it is, you can see that this has the text component of it. And what I will do now is I will usually then go into the body of the note and then insert attachment. I've downloaded the audio file, and what I'm doing now is I'm uploading the audio to this Evernote notebook. Now here goes the catch. On my mobile devices, usually my phone and my tablet, I have Evernote set up as my listen, read, and watch later notebooks to be offline notebooks. So as soon as I open it up, it's going to download those episodes to my phone and have them locally stored. So over time, each of those notebooks is going to be containing a downloaded version of those items, but specifically for the Listen Later, I now have the audio file and the podcast episode available for me to be able to listen to. So instead of me having to worry about whether or not I can listen to it on the road or on the train or plane or whatnot, it's always available to me now to listen here. Plus, as I'm listening to the episode, I will sometimes go to the end here and I will start taking notes directly in the note, right? And that gives me that power to be able to just keep annotating the items inside of the note for that. So that's listen later. Then next up are newsletters. So there are lots of newsletters where I haven't yet transitioned into Feedly, or maybe you never will use Feedly. And in terms of email, you can set up rules. You can do this in the Microsoft 365 side. You can do this here in Gmail. I'm showing you Gmail. But in essence, say that this newsletter's email address is the email address from a newsletter that I receive. I can go ahead and just click the button for forwarding to Evernote, and I can go ahead and forward all emails from this newsletter directly to my Evernote notebook. Now that's going to direct it. If I have turned off the auto filing function, it's going to just direct it to my default notebook, which is my inbox. If I want to be able to direct it through auto filing, just check that option in your settings and you'll be able to go ahead and have it guess at where to place it. I don't like to do that, so I like to just have it go ahead and direct it to the inbox, and then I actually manually place those items in there. And just so that we're clear, remember that we want to tag all of these listen later, so these items are tagged as well. So making sure we're tagging those. But so I can email newsletters from my email through a filter, and then creating that filter to forward along to Evernote. And I'm pretty sure that in my Using Evernote with Gmail webinar, I covered how to set up a filter, so you can go ahead and look at that past webinar to figure that out. Last but not least is video. Now, there are cases where I will take short videos and actually place them directly into my watch later notes to watch later. And same thing applies, right? The watch later notebook is an offline notebook in my Evernote account, so it's going to download that video and make it available to me offline to watch, because I don't want to be out in the world trying to watch a video on streaming. So that's really helpful. Most video that I'm watching, though, is going to be of a longer nature, and so is not going to fit within the 200 megabyte limit of Evernote's note size limits in the Evernote Premium account. It's even smaller than that in the basic account, so it's just not worth it. So what I will do is use the web clipper here again. And this gives me the option of being able to, again, when I click on this, because I'm on YouTube, and this happens on other platforms as well, you will get an option for the type of video. Now, if it doesn't recognize the video platform, you can still use article, simplified article, or otherwise to be able to choose. But here it's recognizing this as a YouTube video. And then again, I can choose watch later. I can type in my watch later tag, and now I'll be able to go ahead and capture this video to it. Now this is a link. This is not downloading the video. This is just a link to the video for me to be able to watch later. And this falls into that category of me deciding whether or not I want to be able to track, say, a short video or something else like that that I want to watch, or a long video that is going to require more time for me to do so. I tend to use my YouTube watch later for shorter videos, those that are probably 10 to 15 minutes or less. If it's a longer video, then I'm going to capture it into Evernote for me to be able to organize and manage in a better way. And so that's when I will put those into the watch later notebook so that I can manage those. I don't want my YouTube watch later list to get really long, and so I like to use those there as well. So you could do all kinds of interesting things in and with those. It just basically takes the thumbnail from the video and places that into it. And in your watch later notebook now, you have this little video setup so that you can see, and if you click on this link, now it will push you out to the YouTube video to watch later. Okay. Now, like I said, if this was on another platform where it allowed you to download the video, and that video was under 200 megabytes, you could easily place that into Evernote, set your phone or tablet to offline mode for that notebook, and it'll go ahead and save those items for you. So that's usually really helpful. Okay. With that, I'm going to stop this, restart this, and go to here. Wonderful. All right. So that is the demo portion of my time with you today. Upcoming webinars. I'm going to be announcing a whole new series of webinars in the next month or so. So just stand by. You can check out events.evernote.com. If you're not a member of Personal Productivity Club, I do post all of the webinars in Personal Productivity Club, and the archived webinars are also inside of Personal Productivity Club in our resources library. So if you want to watch any of the backlog of Evernote webinars, go to Personal Productivity .club, www.personalproductivity.club, and you'll find the webinar archives to all of those. But I will be announcing new ones. I'm really excited now that the Evernote version 10 is out for desktop and iOS. I'm just going to hold off until the Android version comes out, and then I will announce all of the future upcoming webinar series for the rest of this year as well as into next year. Just excited to talk about all of those other things. And so with that, Q&A. I'm going to turn over to the chat here, and hopefully I can find and see these questions for you. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to place this up on screen, and then here we go. So questions. Feedly. Sorry, I'm scrolling back through the questions now. So for the person talking about Evernote conflicts, I have also been receiving those Evernote conflicts, and I know that Evernote is working on fixing those. And I'm pretty sure it's just because when you have Evernote open with the same note in multiple places, it's having some trouble recognizing that they're open in multiple places, and they're creating those conflicts. I'm suffering there with you, and I'm hoping that Evernote will fix that very soon. And I don't know. I don't know what the diff checker service is, but if you want to explain it for the rest of us, that would be great. I'm not sure what the diff checker service is. It looks like Frank Buck found the Kindle email address. Wonderful. And then down here, let's see. Feedly. When you set it up, did you set it up with Evernote or Gmail? So when I set up the Feedly account, I just use my personal email address. And so that's the personal email address. Now, Feedly in the Premium or Pro account, whichever whatever they call it, I think it's Premium, they give you a new email address to be able to use for that. Now, I integrated with Evernote. So Feedly has an Evernote integration. If you see in that left-hand panel, there was an integrations button in the secondary drawer. If you click on that integrations, you are then able to be taken into the settings to integrate with Evernote, and that ties it to your binds it to your Evernote account. But if I haven't answered that completely, you let me know, and I'll answer it again, hopefully better. Stacy's noting you'd love to organize and compile notes regularly, but you're starting from 1,000, in effect, a reading reference. Any tips on how to process this many? Is there a mass tagging option? So prior to version 10, if you're running basically the 6-dot versions on the desktop, yes, you can highlight and select all the notes in a series, and you can go ahead and just basically tag them. I usually like to tag them with the date, right? So it might be archive dash and then the date that you're archiving, and then just move those all to an archive notebook. Okay, and then you can leave them there forever, or you can process them slowly over time. I like to use the method of today, yesterday, and the oldest days. And every day I deal with today, yesterday, and the oldest days. And that way you're dealing with everything in your notebook from today and yesterday, and then going to your archive notebook and just going to the oldest date and dealing with the oldest date in that notebook. And then over time, right, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Your mountain of items of 1,000+ notes weren't created in a day either, I'm hoping. And so therefore, you can go ahead and over time just kind of work on today, getting stuff processed today, read and dealt with today, and then things that are, of course, old, you're cleaning up the rear, coming up the rear guard and cleaning up on time. And it looks like Frank showed how to do multi-selection, so thank you, Frank. And yeah, so Narrow is narrow.co. So anybody who is interested in Narrow, it's narro.co, and so you can go ahead and find Narrow there. Wonderful tool. And user 8774, you say, on a desktop, do you tend to use Evernote app or web, and why? So I'm showing you the Evernote web version just because with all of the new versions going around, I just wanted to show you that you could use this no matter the desktop or web versions. So I just wanted to show that. And so I tend to use the Evernote desktop version. Right now, I'm running both the Evernote 6.25 and Evernote 10 concurrently on my systems, and I will likely do that for the near term until there's feature parity to get Evernote up and running. Since I can do it, I'm doing it. If you have any workflows that you've designed around 6.25 and Evernote 10 doesn't have those features, just roll back. There is a set of instructions on how to do that. And then install old version. Here it is. So you can, I'm just going to paste this link into the chat, but in essence, if you upgraded to Evernote version 10 and you need to go back to version 6.25 in order to be able to get your workflows back in order, use the article that I just pasted in the links there in the comment chat, and that way you can go ahead and have access to that for using that. And they're going to keep it running and servicing that for quite a bit of time, I'm sure, as they get version 10 to feature parity. Okay, and then so follow up on that. Diff Checker is a tool to compare text differences between two text files. Fantastic. Okay, so you can enter content of two files and click Find Difference. Fantastic. That's a really great tool. I will definitely check that out. And so if I don't see any other questions, so if you do have any other questions after the fact, my email address is on the screen. Feel free to shoot me an email message, and I will be happy to respond as I'm able to. I have a podcast, Getting More Done with Evernote, and about twice a month, I'm going to start. I've started already doing this again now that Evernote 10 is out. I'm going to be putting out episodes about twice a month, talking to different folks at Evernote, as well as Evernote certified consultants like myself and other Evernote regional leaders, and talking about how to use Evernote better. So Getting More Done with Evernote is there. You can always follow me on Twitter at @RSidney-Smith, and then find me on Instagram at @FocusAtWorkCo. And so with that, as I said, stay abreast of new webinars either on events.evernote.com, or you can go ahead and join Personal Productivity Club for free, and I'll post the events there once I'm ready to announce them. But thank you all for joining me here. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for the engagement. I've really appreciated and enjoyed my time showing you how to use Evernote to manage online reading. And take care. Here's to your productive life.